Hi, my name is Daniela Moreira. I am talking about exploring the relationship between emotional brain formation, stress, depression, food addiction, and weight. Definition. The emotion of the brain respond quickly to situations that threaten our integrity and also have a very important influence on motivation and learning, decision making, cognition, behavior, and adaptation. These emotions sometimes lead us to complex situations we are held by emotions that we do not know how to handle. It is necessary to find a balance between the rational mind, frontal lobe, and the emotional mind limbic system, for it is necessary to know our emotions, physiological response, and functioning in general so that we can control and use this emotion in order not to overhelp, use and not make decisions that will affect use in the long run, for example, obesity, depression, anorexia, bulimia, between others. Application for nutrition. Emotion will play in the choice, quality, and quantity of food eating, leading to an increase or decrease in body weight. The relationship between and eating behavior is bidirectional and depends on the context, on the variability of the emotion in the terms of disbalance, arousal, and intensity, as well as on the physiological variability of the subject. Within the context of obesity, the concept of the emotional eater has been described as an individual who uses food as a functional mechanism to deal with the negative emotion and their apathy, frustration, and modern others.
But there can be a point when it becomes an unhealthy relationship. And that's why we've got registered nutritionist Dr. Joey Schulman here now to talk about getting off the roller coaster of emotional eating. It is possible to get off, apparently. You and I have talked about this ad nauseum. My home office was in the kitchen. The fridge was right there. The cupboards were right there. It's just this constant back and forth for no good reason. So let's talk about why we emotional eat. And are we all doing it?
Everybody, Tracy. I have heard from viewers, from my clients, everybody. These are unprecedented times. And what do we do when we're stressed? We look for sugar, we look for fat, we look for salt. And we're not looking for it at breakfast. We're emotionally eating 3 o'clock, before dinner, after dinner. I get it. I believe that everybody's an emotional eater to a certain degree. Happy, bored, sad, lonely, we eat. The only thing is that food doesn't affect us just physically. It affects us emotionally too. So if you've had to dive into the gummy bears a couple times or the chips a couple times, honestly, guys, no big deal. Dust off your knees. Let's get back to life. But if we continually do that, it will affect mood and it makes us feel inflamed. Like, forget about weight gain for a second. It just doesn't make you feel good. And everything we can do for self care right now is really, really important. We
Pro and con. Pro, the increasing food intake in the face of positive emotion has been little studied and has not been related to a sex weight. Con, eating by disorder, negative emotion are perceived by our body as a threat which causes that a physiological level glucose is released into the blood, which in turn suppresses the feeling of hunger. Therefore, eating in response to emotion is not a physiological mechanism but a learned behavior in society.
Did you know that an average of 35% of adolescent girls engage in crash dieting, fasting, self-induced vomiting, or take diet pills or laxatives? Even more frightening is the fact that 42% of first through third grade girls have an outspoken desire of being thinner. Hello, I'm Dr. Elba Iglesias. I'm the Medical Director of Adolescent Medicine at Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital. The first thing every parent must know about eating disorders is that this is an issue that requires medical attention, and it not only affects girls, but boys too. How can a parent know if this is happening within their household? Here are 5 signs your child may have an eating disorder. If your child starts showing concerns for weight, food, labels, or dieting, this is an early sign that when treated in time and with professional help can avoid significant damage and long-term consequences. It's common to see an increase in anxiety in a child or adolescent who's developing an eating disorder. Anxiety often follows with weight loss and can be both a precursor to or a byproduct of anorexia. Avoidance of mealtime or plans involving food, change in behaviors around mealtime, or withdrawal from friends and social activities are also key indicators that an eating disorder might be in process. More clear signs would be abuse of laxatives, diuretics, diet pills, or self-induced vomiting. Also, a change in their dressing habits, such as oversized clothing to cover the body or revealing clothes to flaunt weight loss. Unusual food behaviors, such as cutting food into tiny pieces, using large quantities of condiments, subtly insisting on using particular spoons, forks, cups, or plates, are traits of teenagers who suffer from anorexia. The most important thing is to remember to avoid making accusations, be supportive, and seek immediate help from a professional if an eating disorder is suspected. Early intervention is key. This is it for today. I'm Dr. Elba Iglesias. See you soon on another Josie's Quick Tips.
Issue application Ecuador. Mental health problems are very prevalent in the adolescents and young adult population in Ecuador. A study was carried out by part of the Central University which showed a prevalence of 13.4% of depression in the city of Quito. Obesity varies in young people between the age of 15 and 20 with a BMI greater than 34.5% and stress with 47%.
Eating disorders are about more than food. They're complex mental health conditions that affect a person's sense of worth and self-esteem and can take a serious toll on his or her physical health. Binge eating disorder, or BED, is one that's more common than you might think. In fact, in a survey across 14 countries, almost 2% of people experienced binge eating disorder. And although all eating disorders deserve attention, in this study, binge eating disorder was more prevalent than bulimia in virtually all countries. One thing all eating disorders have in common is that they seriously disrupt eating behavior. Individuals with anorexia nervosa often go to great lengths to maintain a low body weight, often by drastically limiting how much they eat or by exercising to excess. Their perception of themselves is often skewed, so they may feel overweight even when they're not. By comparison, those living with bulimia nervosa often binge or eat large amounts of food, then purge or get rid of that food, often by vomiting or using laxatives. So rather than limiting what food goes into their bodies, they control how food leaves their bodies. Importantly, just because a person may sometimes binge eat, that doesn't mean they have binge eating disorder. So where exactly does binge eating disorder fit in? You can think of binge eating disorder as a repetitive cycle of eating and distress. While its exact cause is unknown, binge eating disorder may have origins in the nervous system, which is designed to process information and mediate behavior. Possible triggers include social stress, restrictive diets, negative feelings towards food or one's body, and boredom. But what differentiates binge eating disorder from other eating disorders we've already looked at? For starters, with binge eating disorder, no actions are taken to undo or make up for the effects of binging, like vomiting or overexercising, as with bulimia. And interestingly, binge eating disorder affects men and women more equally than bulimia tends to. Now, what exactly counts as an episode of binging? These incidents involve eating very large amounts of food with a sense of lack of control. much more food than most would eat in a similar time period or situation. And these episodes don't just happen on Thanksgiving or at buffet dinners, they occur on a regular basis. But how often is regular? The episodes must occur at least once a week for 3 months before the behavior can be considered recurring and not just occasional. How can you learn to recognize binge eating disorder? Well, symptoms might include eating extremely fast, eating until you're uncomfortably full, eating without actually being hungry, eating alone due to embarrassment, or feeling depressed afterwards. In fact, feelings of shame, guilt, or disgust after eating are quite common, causing a great amount of distress. And those living with binge eating disorder may hide their behavior due to shame, even from their doctors and loved ones. But they don't have to. Recognizing binge eating disorder is the first step to getting help. If you think you or someone you know might have binge eating disorder, you can always ask a healthcare professional or reach out to patient organizations or support groups. They can lend an ear, help you understand what you're going through, and may be able to help you manage your condition. Learn to recognize binge eating disorder. There is help.
Conclusion. The emotion can greatly affect people and therefore trigger countless diseases such as being overweight or underweight. So much so that they go hand in hand with stress, depression, or big eating, social factors that are experienced on daily basis, affecting the people and largely women.
The science behind stress eating. A new study explores how we reach for chocolate instead of an apple when we are under pressure. Our Dr. Tara Ruler is with us. Good morning, Tara.
Good morning, Vanita.
I was fascinated that they looked at men in this study instead of looking at women.
They did. So they looked at 51 young, healthy men, and they broke them into two groups, 29 of which were subjected to stress. They had to place their hand in a bucket of ice water for about 3 minutes while they were videotaped. They then took both groups of men and showed them a series of images comparing two foods, one that was an unhealthy but tasty option like a cookie, and one that was again, they would be rewarded with one of the options they had chosen. During this time, they also scanned their brains with functional MRIs to look at blood flow to different parts of the brain. They checked their stress hormone levels and asked them about their levels of stress. So that was the basis of the study. And fascinatingly, what they found was that the men who had been under stress actually chose the more unhealthy or tasty options, the short-term reward.
But you're saying there was a physiological actual something that they could see from the MRI.
There was, and that was actually what was most interesting, is when they looked at the MRIs, they found different patterns of connectivity or changes in the brain circuitry. And so what they saw was that the more primitive areas of the brain, the amygdala and the striatum that control emotion, motivation, reward, pleasure, were heightened, were amplified. And the parts of the brain that control goals, your long-term goals and planning were sort of decreased or diminished. And so there was an imbalance there in the signaling in the brain.
So what's the harm?
What's the harm? Well, I think the big thing is that we talk about willpower and self-control as if it's almost something very simple. Just stop eating, have more self-control. And this really tells us that there's a lot more biologically there that may be playing into it, and that it's not just an on-off switch, but that there are multiple neural pathways that are at work, and any change in any part of that pathway could offset your ability to have optimal self-control.
And that's why you say willpower is overrated. So how do you outsmart, essentially,
Thank you.